Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Mr. Healthy Habit Show. Now, today, we are going to talk about action and about discipline. And this all stems from a series of lectures that I've been listening to from the Great Courses series entitled The Meaning of Life. It struck me in a very profound way and in many ways have inspired me to bring these episodes in this podcast to you. So I would highly recommend it if you're into audiobooks and love the Great Courses as much as I do. Now, the first lecture that I've heard in this series is on the Bavaghad Gita. A very interesting lecture about action and about discipline and about how to approach life without allowing the world to buffet us about. It was very profound stuff that struck me in many ways. We're also going to cover teachings from Lao Tzu, from the Buddha, from Aristotle, from the Stoics. One of the many things that I've learned here throughout these series of lectures is that philosophy is not about thinking. Philosophy is about doing. It's a practice. It's about action. So today we are going to discuss action. So one of the main themes of this lecture is how we cannot control what happens externally. We cannot control how people react. We cannot control what the world brings us and puts on our plate or what it takes away from us. The only thing we can control at the end of the day is action. We are creatures of action. That is what we were put here on this world to do, is to act. That is how, in terms of the Bhagavad Gita, that we can live a meaningful life, is through one of action. And I'll give you an example here because that's the best way that I could find to actually relate these thoughts here to you. Let's use this podcast here that I'm recording as an example. Now, there's all kinds of thoughts that enter my mind while I'm recording this. Am I going to say the right thing? Does this sound dumb? Do people understand what I'm trying to say? All of which are things that I cannot control. The only thing that I can control is whether or not I act. And at the end of the day, if I choose not to act because of all these external circumstances that I have no control over, the world buffets me about. I allow it to shake my confidence. I allow it to shake my beliefs. And I freeze and fail to live up to what I could be. It's only when I allow myself to relinquish those attachments, to relinquish my attachment to how this may sound to people, to how people might take me and whether or not they understand me, and act, that I find peace and serenity in my actions. I very well could look at this later on and see that 2 people listened. And it's those kind of circumstances that we all, including myself, need to learn to relinquish ourselves from. I cannot allow those kind of circumstances to buffet me about and shake who I am to the core. The only thing I can do is act. Now, there's an old Zen proverb that says that we cannot control whether or not we hit the target. The only thing we can control is the shooting of the arrow. You can control your form, your aim, how well you pull back the bow, how practiced you are, but you cannot control at the end of the day whether or not that arrow is going to hit the target. So in life, we have a duty to focus on the shooting, focus on the discipline, and not focus on the goal, not focus on the target. When we focus on that goal and attach our self-worth to whether or not we hit the bullseye, whether or not my message is conveyed properly, again, the world buffets me about and freezes me and inhibits my ability to connect with a greater good. See, all of that stuff, whether or not this podcast is heard, whether or not people listen to me, whether or not I hit the target on the bullseye, all of that is rather meaningless. It has no meaning. What has meaning is that I acted, is that I recorded this and that I put this out there, and that maybe someone will listen who will profoundly be affected by this and be inspired to listen to the Great Courses series or continue to listen to my podcast, and very well might change the world for them. There's another Buddha proverb, one of my favorites. You can't change the world, but you might be able to change the world for one person. And I'll go even deeper into this. I'm going to use an example of a conversation that I've had with my boy. I can remember one morning being in my garage working out, and he comes into the garage, into my gym, and asks me, "Daddy, you know how you're always studying these books about attachment? Well, I have a question for you. At night, I know I should be doing my homework rather than playing my video games, but I just can't. I just want to play my video games. How can I focus more on doing my homework rather than playing my video games?" For a 9-year-old, that's a very serious, profound question, and I was very impressed and proud of him when he asked me that. And conveniently enough, that question came right after I had finished the lecture on the Bavaghad Gita. And the advice that I gave to my son is, there are two ways to look at this here. All of the world is divine. And when we do things in accordance with the world, when we do things that allow ourselves to become better people for the sake of the world, we give our lives meaning. When we do things that are for our own pleasure and for our own gratification, that don't mean anything to anyone, we detach ourselves from that divinity and live a life that is self-gratifying and one that has no meaning. I explained to him, when you play your video game, yes, it's fun. Yes, you enjoy it, and you should. But it has no meaning in a greater context in terms of the universe, in terms of your future. When you do your homework, that allows you to become a more intelligent, a more thoughtful, a better person that you can now turn around and give to the world. And that gives your life meaning. That is what creates a meaningful life. You have to have the discipline to stay away from the video game when you know you have other responsibilities, such as your homework, that are allowing you to connect to a higher good, which is the world. When you shrug off those responsibilities and go for your video game, you are allowing yourself to be held captive by this thing. You're allowing it to, in a sense, enslave you. Freedom does not come from saying, I want to do what I want all day, whether it's play my video game or whether it's this or that, whatever your vices are that you go to for some kind of self-gratification that have no meaning in a greater context. For him, it's his video game. For me, it could be a number of other things. For you, it's something different. But the thing that we need to understand is when we're allowing these vices to imprison us, we are not free in that sense. If I go home and decide that I'm going to spend the whole night playing video games rather than working on my responsibilities, I've allowed it to captivate me. I'm not free. I've given in to self-gratification and to things that are meaningless. It's only when I exercise discipline from those things that I'm able to achieve a freedom that allows me connect to a higher good, a greater purpose. So those are just some thoughts that I've gotten from my lectures so far on the Bhagavad Gita. We will go further into this. I'm really enjoying it. I'm happy with the way that I've gotten my thoughts out this morning. I hope you are too. And I hope that you do have a blessed day. And again, follow me on Instagram at philosophical.reminders or at Mr. underscore healthy underscore habits, or on my YouTube channel. There should be a link in the description that would allow you to connect with me on all different forms of media. And I hope you enjoyed this discussion. Please leave comments or questions if you'd like to hear more, if there is anything else you'd like for me to discuss. We will go back to the Bhagavad Gita once I have more to say on the topic. And again, I'm looking forward to some interesting discussions on Taoism, on Buddhism, on Gandhiism, on the thoughts from Mills, Kant, Hume, Nietzsche, as well as other practices. I've gotten an idea for my next podcast coming up on the next Philosophical Friday, which is going to be about emptying our cup. Well, thank you again, and you have an awesome day. Man, I'm feeling like a freaking $1,000,000 here, and I hope you are too.